Hi, thanks for joining us again to watch the Doctor Podcast Cykiert Files show. We really appreciate you watching this episode number 89. And today we would really appreciate it if you could also subscribe and follow to Doctor Podcasts and also like, repost, and share this episode with people you know because they'll find it very interesting and also very important. Today, we're discussing a very important topic that's been overlooked for years, but is becoming more and more important, and that's the topic of nutrition. What should we be eating to keep ourselves healthy, to keep ourselves living longer, having a long longevity, and avoiding chronic diseases such as diabetes and obesity and high blood pressure and strokes and heart attacks and dementia. And we're going to find out the answers to that with our two excellent guests today. Our guest today is Dr. Ewa Pietrysiak. Dr. Pietrysiak is Director of Marketing and Innovation at USA Pulses, which we'll find out a little bit more about. She's dedicated to promoting the nutritional, environmental, and economic benefits of pulse crops, which we'll find out about as well. She holds an engineering degree in food processing and human nutrition, and she also has a master's and a Ph.D. degree in food science from Washington State University. Our other guest is Tim McGreevy. Tim's the CEO of the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council. He's also the CEO of the American Pulse Association. He's responsible for international and domestic market development, research, policy development, and expanding the pulse crop feeding programs and increasing domestic consumption of pulse crops in the USA, and we'll find out why that's very important for your health and longevity. So, Tim, I'd like to start with you. First, I'd like to thank both of you for taking the time from your busy schedule to join us today on the Doctor Podcast Cykiert File Show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really great to be here, and we really appreciate the opportunity to showcase these really terrific foods for your health.
That's great. So, Tim, tell us about the Dietary Guidelines for America, or DGA, organization, and tell us what that organization does, and the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, or the DGAC.
So the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee is really a group of really elite scientists that every 5 years they get together and they take a look at what is happening, what's the latest science in health and nutrition in our country and actually around the world as well. And this particular body then makes recommendations on what Americans should be eating, a healthy diet that would increase longevity, increase their nutritional intake, their quality of their nutrition, and also their health outcomes. And so we're at the 5 year mark, right? 2025 is coming very close. And we're in 2025, of course. And so now the scientific committee has just published their report. And it's really good news for pulse crops and I believe for the American consumer and America's health overall. And so they've recommended actually, Robert, that pulse intake, and pulses are peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dry beans, that category of food actually be increased from 1.5 cups per week of cooked pulses to 2.5 cups per week. And so this is a huge victory, we believe, actually for America's health and the American citizens' health, and all the health outcomes that we believe can really be improved by following this recommendation.
Right. So Eva, the pulse foods, the pulse is not a term that's heard about frequently. Some people are not familiar with it. In fact, can you tell us some more about what pulse foods are, what they consist of specifically, and also tell us what their nutritional value is in terms of the amount of protein that they contain and the fact that they're a plant protein as opposed to an animal protein.
Yes, you are completely right. All of us, we eat them, but we are not familiar with this term, definitely. So pulses are a subgroup of legume family, right? Legumes plants are the plants that they grow their seeds in the pods. And among these plants, we also have those that have high oil content, for example, soy or peanuts, or that are harvested fresh, like fresh peas and fresh green beans. And these won't be pulses. Pulses are the subgroup of legume crops that are harvested dry. So farmers keep them in the fields until they are completely dry and they are harvested in that form. So very long shelf stable, and that's how we see them in the stores, right? So that's what is differentiate this group. And this group includes uh, dry beans, dry peas, chickpeas, and lentils. And what is wonderful and unique about pulses in terms of nutrition is that they are a great source of both protein and fiber. So we like to have the analogy of Swiss army knife, right? That they are
Right.
multi-tool. So they are providing lots of solutions, and they also have a bunch of different micronutrients too.
Right. So they contain vitamins and other things as well. And they're a plant protein as opposed to an animal protein, which is very important. There's many studies coming out in recent years indicating that people who eat mostly plant proteins seem to stay healthier and have less chronic diseases. Now,
I think it's important to point out, Robert, that these crops have, or these foods really have, they're very low in fat. And so because of that, right, it sets them apart as a plant protein source, and it can actually be a real benefit to helping lower your cholesterol as well because of that fact.
right. So the pulse foods do not contain any cholesterol, as far as I know. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right, as opposed to eating meat, which does have cholesterol, and chicken has it as well, and many fish have it as well. Also, we know now that saturated fats seem to be bad for you, and my understanding is that the pulse foods do not contain significant saturated fat or almost no saturated fat at all. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So most of pulses will only have 1 to 2 grams of fat per 100 grams, right? And then chickpea, they have a little bit more, around 6 grams, but these are considered good fats. So no saturated fats, no high levels of saturated fats, and definitely no cholesterol.
That's great. And also, they have a large amount of protein in them. And what's the carbohydrate component of it? Is it very high compared to, let's say, eating meat or chicken or fish, which are other sources of protein?
Yes, so pulses will contain carbohydrates, but the good thing is that these are the low digestible carbohydrates, right? So they will not increase our glucose level after consuming pulses, and they will feed our microbiome. So they do have carbohydrates, but we consider them the good carbohydrates.
So you've got good carbohydrates, but not too much of it. You've got excellent plant-based protein, and you don't have cholesterol, and you don't have saturated fats. What about salt content? You know, salt or sodium has been associated with high blood pressure, which increases the risks of heart attacks and strokes. What's the salt content of the pulse foods?
Yeah, so this is another benefit of
Right.
pulses. They almost no contain no salt. It's like 0 to 2 milligrams, right? So naturally they do not contain sodium. Of course, salt is added to food products like canned beans, but that can also be reduced by rinsing beans or chickpeas from cans with water, and we can reduce that sodium level. Or also we can choose the low sodium versions of these products.
Right. So that's an extra health benefit as well. So, Tim, tell us where the term pulse or pulses foods comes from, because I don't think a lot of people are familiar with that specific name.
Pulses around the world actually are a common nomenclature, and it actually derives from the Latin word pulse, Puls, and that word actually means thick soup in the Latin language. And so
Wow.
you think of the Roman times, right, where they were out conquering the world, and wow, they stretched long distances. And remember, they were doing that with pulse crops and a cereal grain like rice on their backs. And they were able to travel long distances without food spoilage because all they'd have to do is cook their lentils or their chickpeas or their dry beans every single evening while they were out conquering the world, and then they could move on quickly. And so that's why in the Roman culture, right, the names of these crops are actually part of their family names. And my favorite story is actually Cicero, who was one of the most famous Roman statesmen. Actually, his name actually means Mr. Chickpea, because Cicer is the
Really?
name for chickpeas. Lentilus is the Latin name for lentils in our culture. Faba beans for dry beans, and phaseolus, also famous Roman names, right? Paiso,
Wow.
Paisum. Those are famous family names in the Roman culture, and they were named after pulses. Can you believe that? I
No,
mean,
I
that's
wasn't
how
aware of that.
important they
That's
were.
incredible.
Yeah, that's how important they were to that culture, and frankly, still today important to that culture in their diet. And in America, right, our culture, we need to increase consumption of these really terrific foods if we plan to travel far.
Right. So these foods are great because they also can be carried around dry for almost as long as you want. And they don't spoil. You don't have to keep them in salt or refrigerate them or do anything special. And then when you want to eat them, what do you do? How do you prepare them?
So for beans, peas, and for chickpeas as well, you need to soak them overnight or at least for several hours, and then cook them for 30 minutes, 1 hour. With pressure cooker now, we have now
Instapots now
Instant
make it
pots,
very easy,
tools
right?
that they can cook much faster. And lentils are a little bit different. They can be cooked without soaking, and they cook in within 15 to 30 minutes. So these are the easiest ones.
And
And
of
you're soaking them in water, is that correct?
Yes.
Absolutely. And of course, we have the canned option as well for all of these terrific foods. And they're very easy. And again, as Eva said, you can buy the low sodium part. You can rinse them out to get some of that sodium out of the regular ones if you so choose. But they're very easy to use and cook in the canned form as well. And
Right.
the bonus, if you have lentils only cook in about 30 to 40 minutes. They don't require any soaking overnight at all, actually. They're a relatively small seed and they cook actually very quickly.
Right. And the soaking is needed to kind of soften the food. Otherwise, it's very hard to bite on. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. It's softened then, and also it removes partial of the anti-nutrients that all legume seeds have. So that's a double reason, but mostly it's to soften the texture.
I mean, it's to rehydrate them, right?
Right.
To put them into a state so they become soft and you cook them. And so, there's a lot of different forms of these crops now coming forward in a lot of new food innovation as well. And but the traditional way of just soaking them, or for lentils case, just cooking them from 30 to 40 minutes. Wow. I mean, it doesn't get any better nutritionally than that.
Right. And I love them because I find them to be super tasty. I could sit and eat them all the time. And chickpeas are an excellent snack as well, right?
Yeah, so are you thinking about the roasted chickpeas?
Either roasted or just kind of cooked, and then you keep them in the refrigerator or room temperature and eat them as a snack instead of potato chips, cookies, cake, and other highly processed foods, which are now associated with many of the chronic diseases that we face.
Yes, yes, you are right. And we were thinking about roasted chickpeas because this is one of the products that we are seeing increase development in the food industry. Um, Food producers are looking for ways to improve the nutritional profile of snacks,
Right.
and they use pulses to do so. And we can see now roasted chickpeas, roasted lentils, fava beans, and other products. And as Tim mentioned, the innovation now, it's amazing to see what's happening, especially for me, for food scientists. So not only pulses are used in their whole form, but also they are converted into ingredients such as flours, protein isolates, starches, fibers, and then with that, food producers can add them to lots of different types of food products across different sectors and provide more nutrition to the consumer.
Right. I remember when I was a kid in elementary school, there was a vendor who used to hang out in front of the school and basically sell chickpeas, roasted chickpeas in cups to the kids. And we'd love to have that when we had our recess break. Now, people are eating hot dogs and hamburgers and processed meats, which are not as healthy and probably are hazardous. So we should go back to the old days, like when I was in elementary school eating chickpeas. Now, Eva, what's the difference between a garbanzo and a chickpea, or is that the same thing?
Yes, absolutely. It's the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
from where the word came from. Garbanzo is usually used in the Latin speaking or Spanish speaking countries. So it's coming from the Latin words. And then um, chickpeas uh, are
Really.
coming from English, right?
Right.
Is
The
that
rest the rest of the world,
rest of
really,
the world?
The English world is chickpeas. Yeah. They're the
Right.
same, absolutely the same food, same crop, just different languages. Garbanzo is chickpea in the Latin cultures. So
Mhm.
I see, just a different name for it. That's good to
just
know.
a different name, same product. They make terrific hummus as well. You know,
Right.
you can't have chickpeas without hummus. They're absolutely great. We have the Super Bowl coming up pretty soon, and you better have hummus on your Super Bowl party at your Super Bowl party because it's not only terrific for you, but it's a very delicious snack and dip.
Yeah, I was at a Greek restaurant a couple of days ago, and they had these giant plates of hummus and this very nice bread, and I couldn't stop eating it. Fortunately, it doesn't have as many calories as other types of foods, and it's good, healthy plant protein, and it doesn't have the saturated fats and cholesterol. So I don't feel as guilty eating hummus and chickpeas and garbanzos as when I eat the other types of foods. Now, Tim, can you tell us the difference between the protein types that are present in the pulse foods as compared to meats and fish and dairy? And a follow-up question is, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, can you just eat pulse foods to obtain your protein? Do you really need any animal proteins in your diet?
Well, I think the Indian culture probably is the best example of this, where the majority of their population actually is vegetarian, and their primary protein source is pulse crops, is
Hmm.
peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dried beans. So I think for millennia, right? In fact, these crops, I'm a farmer as well. I actually
All right.
raise peas, lentils, and chickpeas on my farm. And, since the beginning of agriculture over 12,000 years ago, these were some of the first crops cultivated by the hunter and gatherers who finally decided that, hunting and gathering was a ton of work. And sometimes we didn't eat as well as we wanted to. So maybe let's grow a few crops. So these were one of the first
Right.
foods actually cultivated were peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dry beans, along with cereal grains, rice and wheat and barley. And the benefit of that is, and from a farming perspective as well, it's all about a cropping system, right? And so you need cereal grains in your cropping system, but you also need pulse crops in your cropping system. And they actually complement each other as foods as well, because pulses are high in lysine and they're low in methionine. But cereal grains, right? They're low in lysine and high in methionine. And so they're like one building block short of a full protein, pulses and cereal grains. But when they're combined, rice and beans, lentils and rice, that's
Hmm.
the reason that they are, when they are combined, and with other foods as well, can also serve that need. Then they become a complete vegetable protein, just like meat products. And so that's why our friends in India, who we think of as, well, the majority of the culture is vegetarian. How can they survive without meat? Well, is because they're eating a balanced diet with cereal grains and pulses, having a complete protein, and they do quite well. And as well, right, they have lower levels of heart disease, diabetes, lower cholesterol levels, because these foods are so high in dietary fiber that they are just terrific for your health for so many reasons, right? They're a good source of iron, potassium, magnesium, choline, zinc. I mean, the list is almost endless, right? Of
Right.
what type of nutrients these crops actually bring to the table. And so that's why they're not a complete protein by themselves, right? Where meat products are a complete protein by themselves, but when combined with other foods, wow! I mean, and special cereal grains, they are a complete protein and terrific for the building blocks that you need. We have to have protein in our diets, and they're just terrific for that.
Yes,
So
and
you mentioned, yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Eva.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that even though we have a little bit less of pulses, I mean, have a little bit less of the sulfur-containing amino acids, they are still there, and our bodies can pull up amino acids from different foods, so we shouldn't be concerned about that. And I love the example of India, but also let's look at all Latin America
Sure.
combining beans and rice, right? So there are ways, and vegetarian and vegans, they don't need to worry about providing the complete protein without eating meat. And also looking at advantages of pulses, we have the lack of cholesterol, low sodium, right? And then, of course, addition of fiber, which fiber is such an important nutrient. And
Right.
we are not providing any fiber with meat and animal products, right? So that's very important, I think, too.
I do want to be clear, the beauty of consuming pulses in your diet, peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dry beans, is they blend with everything. And
Right.
they blend with animal protein products as well. I mean, where's the chili without the beans? Okay. And so they blend together. And we can blend together with all foods to up the nutritional profile, up the dietary fiber, up the nutritional quality of your diet, just by blending them with other foods, whether it's animal protein or dairy or cereal grains or vegetables. Wow. I mean, we are the friendliest food that you can consume, Robert. I mean, we
Yeah.
we we get along with everybody, and we're friends with everybody, and we can make anything taste better, as well as increase the nutritional value of your diet as well.
Right. I just want to mention, you mentioned the lysine and methionine. Those are amino acids, which are the components that make proteins.
Right.
So what you're saying is that if you eat the beans and also the rice, you're getting all the amino acids that you need
That's
without
correct.
without having to eat meat, which contains saturated fats, cholesterol, and products.
Yes,
Now,
also tree nuts are completing
You bet.
the amino acid composition of legumes. So eating almonds also can complete that.
right, I wanted to ask you, what's the difference between pulses and the nut foods such as peanuts, almonds, and all the other nuts that we see?
Yes, nuts are great foods too,
Yeah.
very nutritious. However, they will have much higher fat content than pulses, right? Pulses we discussed, they will have from 1 to 6%, and then for nuts, it can go up to, I think, is 80% or something like that. So, for example, walnuts have 65% of content is fat. So that it will make them a little bit more caloric. I think you cannot cook so many dishes also with tree nuts. But nutrition wise, that will be the main difference. They also contain protein, which is complementary to legumes. So it's nice to include both in your diets for sure.
Absolutely. They're a great complement to each other, right? And
Right.
so we need more nuts in our diet as well. They're a terrific food, but they sure can be blended with a lot of like popped lentils or roasted chickpeas are really terrific. Also, split peas that are roasted, also great in that snack mix. They can be blended with a lot of terrific foods, and pulses are certainly one of those foods that blends with nuts as well.
Right. Now, you mentioned fiber.
Yeah.
Uh, the pulses contain a lot of fiber. Can you tell us the importance of fiber in the diet? That's become more important. We've figured that out in the last few years. But what is the importance of fiber?
Yes, fiber is hugely important in our diet. I think this is my favorite topic. And also because we are just now exploring that and learning how much fiber is important, how our microbiome is important. Fiber, the daily recommendation for fiber, it's 38 grams for men and 25 grams for women. And what's this shocking is that less than 10% of US population is meeting this goal.
Yeah.
So I think I was reading somewhere that we are eating around just 15 grams. And I was thinking like, oh, is that really true? So yes, recommend this exercise to anyone. Counted my fiber intake for 1 or 2 days. And yes, it's really hard to get enough fiber to hit that goal because all our food that is available in the stores, food processors usually take fiber out to improve the flavor and texture of products and the acceptability. So it's not easy task. So why fiber is so important? Fiber regulates our digestion and prevents constipation. So it makes sure everything is moving and we are feeling well. It
Right.
also regulates the glucose level and it can decrease bad cholesterol levels. Fiber maintains our gut health and feeds the good bacteria, and good bacteria in turn produces short chain fatty acids, which we know now that are super important. They help our gut health, but also fight inflammation. And I was just reading this morning, there is a new study from Stanford University that was researching the impact of short chain amino acid on cancer and that it fights cancer, so it has a great benefits in this aspect too. And there are studies already showing that increased fiber consumption is associated with lower breast cancer risk and also colon cancer. And the
Yeah.
last, yes, one more thing I wanted to mention is that when we eat foods with high amount of fiber, we keep the feeling of fullness
Yeah.
longer. So that helps us also to maybe not, eat more food and manage the calorie intake and so help with the weight management.
Yeah, I
Right.
think weight management is really important. We basically have a crisis in this country in terms of, having to try to control our weight. And gosh, pulses can really help with that because we don't get enough fiber in our diets. And these crops are really low on the glycemic index. And so they make you feel fuller longer, as Eva explained. And so you just don't have that craving to snack, a mid-meal time. And so it can really help reduce, what do they call it? The circumference of your waist, right? Which, I struggle, everyone struggles with a little bit.
You're
older you
very
get.
diplomatic. That's great.
Exactly.
So instead of taking Ozempic, you just eat more pulses.
Absolutely. In fact, they're actually doing interviews with people saying, gosh, how's your diet changed when you're on these weight reducing drugs? And they're actually, people are having more cravings for more protein crops like lentils and like peas and chickpeas and dry beans. And so actually, gosh, we need to reduce our waist circumference, the technical term, I guess. And I think it'll help actually keep that weight off if you're eating more pulse crops.
Right. Now, Tim, have you been in contact with the new administration coming in about a week? Because as you know, RFK Jr. is very
Absolutely.
interested in reducing chronic disease and all the problems that we're facing. Um, have you been in contact with them to promote this some more? Because I think a lot of people just aren't aware of the great benefits of eating pulses.
We absolutely have been in contact with our RFK Jr. and his team, really promoting, the road to making America healthy again is through pulses. We have got to increase consumption of pulses in our diet. And the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee really recognized that in their report that they put out in mid-December, saying, look, if we want to tackle reducing heart disease and diabetes and other chronic diseases that we face, inflammation that we face, we've got to increase our consumption of these really terrific crops that are high in dietary fiber. And so, yes, we're talking with the Trump administration because if their goal is to try to increase the health of Americans, then that means we're going to have to increase consumption of these really terrific foods that, by the way, aren't only just great for your health, but they're terrific, delicious foods.
Yeah.
In and not just because I work for the pulse industry, but I have lentils or chickpeas or dry beans for breakfast. And I am a very strong advocate of actually having these foods, whole pulses, for breakfast, maybe with an egg, maybe with an avocado, maybe with spinach, but having a pulse for breakfast really carries you right through noon hour. Sometimes I don't even get lunch because Eva keeps me pretty busy here. So, these are really terrific foods first thing in the morning, and I'm a real advocate of that for people's health and also for that satiety that you get all the way through lunchtime.
Right, because it fills you, but with good nutritional products. Now, Eva, the Mediterranean diet in recent years has been promoted as the best diet to reduce a lot of the diseases like heart disease and strokes and dementia, et cetera. Tell us about the components of the Mediterranean diet and how pulses are important for the Mediterranean diet.
Yes, definitely pulses are a fundamental ingredient of Mediterranean diets. This diet recommends daily consumption of pulses, whole grains, nuts. So we should eat these types of foods every day, and then include fish and lean meat 3 times a week, I believe, and of course plenty of healthy fats such as olive oil. So pulses are definitely recognized in the Mediterranean diet, and we see their increased popularity. For example, now blue zones, right, are increasing popularity there, and we see that people are eating more pulses because of these diets.
So the
I mean,
blue zones are areas on the planet where people tend to live longer to a ripe old age. And
absolutely. Yeah,
that's been
absolutely.
associated with eating pulse foods.
Yes, for sure. In fact, in all the blue zone diets, one of the common denominators in those diets is they are rich in pulses. In fact, consumed every day in those diets. And so, hey, if your listeners are interested in living a good, long, active lifestyle, remember in the blue zones, That comes with, of course, a great, terrific diet. Good exercise, of course, is an important part of that. And being in a great community that you feel supported emotionally, but they also eat a lot of pulses in their diet.
Right.
And it's a holistic view, of course, the blue zones. But one of the components is a really good and healthy diet, and that includes pulse crops.
Right. Now, are there better qualities of pulse foods, or are they kind of all the same? Should the consumer look into where they were grown, how they were processed, or harvested? Does that make a difference?
Well, the good news is, as you know, I'm a farmer myself, and we represent farmers here in the U.S. of peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dried beans. And we really do have the best farmers in the world. They are terrific stewards of the soil, and these crops are, they're not only good for our bodies, but they're also terrific for soil health. And because they are one of the unique and few plants in the plant kingdom, right, that actually fix their own nitrogen in the soil. And
Hmm.
what that means, right, they fix their own nitrogen, they're actually creating their own protein source in order to grow themselves stronger. And so I'm just fond of saying, like, these crops are, they're like they get planted and they start to grow and they actually bring their own lunch to work, right? They're not mining it from the soil. They're actually bringing their own lunch to work. And then when they're done growing and are harvested, they actually leave an extra sandwich behind for the following crops. And
Wow.
so these crops are absolutely critical. And there's all different types of farming operations in our coalition. We have organic farmers, we have conventional farmers, we have regenerative farmers. And all farmers that we represent really care about the ground that they are stewards of. And pulse crops are really important in every single cropping system. And we need to increase consumption of these crops so we can increase production of them and diversify our cropping systems here in the United States.
Hmm. Is there a difference between organic pulses and non-organic?
Well, in terms of nutritional quality, not really any differences at all, just in terms of, lower amounts of pesticides in organic products versus conventional products. That's really the major difference. No real difference in their nutritional quality.
Now, Eva, what about the cost of pulse foods compared to other types of foods?
Yes, pulses are definitely very affordable. Yes, there was even a recent study from University of Washington or Washington University.
University of Washington.
University of Washington.
The Huskies.
There are three universities
Hey,
Washington naming it, so yes, but the University in Seattle by Dr. Drevnovsky, who compare the animal source of protein, plant protein, including pulses, so different types of sources of protein, and he concluded that pulses are the most affordable, environmentally friendly, and also nutrient dense source of protein. So maybe Tim, you can speak more to the prices.
Yeah, the prices actually, so for pulse crops, like the Department of Labor Statistics puts out statistics saying that these are really one of the most affordable foods that you can consume, as Eva said, and also the most nutritious as well. But they range between $1 and $2, a pound, and these are really inexpensive foods. And so, we should pay our farmers more, don't you think, Robert? I mean,
absolutely.
for these kind of foods that bring this kind of nutrient density, but they are affordable foods and they're widely adapted. This is what's really terrific about these particular crops, is there's a pulse for every single climate. Whether you're in a drought-stricken area, they're a very low water use crop. Of course, they have a very low carbon footprint. But water is becoming a bigger premium in our countries, especially in the Western United States. And
Right.
so, that is really important that they're a low water use crop. And they're also a low carbon crop, and they're great for soil health because they introduce a new, different type of bacterial than cereal grains and oilseed crops, and that's really terrific for the soil. So they are just a win-win in terms of for on the farm as well as for human health.
Right. And the expense is much less than any meat products, which cost dollars and dollars a pound, or, a pound of salmon is like 15, $17 a pound. So it's much, much more expensive.
We are the most affordable, most nutrient dense, most sustainable foods that you can consume or produce.
Right.
And it's why it's so important that these foods, that these peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dry beans are consumed at much higher levels in our society.
Right. And that's what you are trying to do is to promote this. And I think it's really education. The public's just not aware of how beneficial these foods are, and how much better they are than other things that we're eating, which is causing this chronic disease epidemic.
Yeah, I mean, if you're worried about your health, you should be eating pulses. If you're worried about the environment, and the environment heating up, you should eat more pulses. And so these, if you're concerned, right, about nutrition and having a nutrient dense diet and trying to lose some weight, you should be eating more pulses. In fact, every answer, right, about food consumption, and we're not the only food. Of course, every food has value, right? But the truth is we consume so little in this country of this food that we just have to increase the level of consumption of these really terrific crops, whether you're worried about your health or nutrient content or the environment. And plus, they're just so delicious. There is so many different ways we can prepare these foods that are just absolutely craveable. And we have a lot of those on usapulses.org. If they go to our website, let me tell you, we have great recipes for every single pulse and every single dietary need. They
Right.
are also gluten-free, by the way. All right. For those who have faced that issue, and if you have problems with gluten, these are gluten-free products. And
Really.
a lot of terrific new food innovation that Eva is definitely engaged with on our staff that's coming down the pipe and already here that really broadens the horizon in terms of these foods in our diet and makes them much more convenient if you needed a faster fix like roasted chickpeas or roasted lentils, they're available now in your
Right.
store. And you should be picking these up and trying them because they really are terrific foods.
Right. On that topic, can you also, you mentioned the carbon footprint is
Yeah.
better. Can you explain why that is?
Well, the carbon footprint of pulses is pretty easy, right? Because we don't have to apply any nitrogen fertilizer for this plant to thrive and grow. Maybe a little bit amounts in some of the pulse crops for like starter fertilizer, but very, very little. And so most food crops consume a lot of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, which takes natural gas to produce. In order for them to get good yields, they have to have that nitrogen, that protein building block in their roots so they can grow big and tall and strong and produce a good crop. But pulses produce their own nitrogen, Robert. They produce their own protein.
Really?
This is like a miracle of the food system, these crops. And they leave extra nitrogen behind, right? So the following crops need less nitrogen fertilizer in order to produce a good crop. So these are so important to our food system, and they're so important to consume our consumers to recognize and be educated on. Wow, if you really want to improve soil health, you really want to help the planet, you really want to improve your nutrition and your health outcomes and your longevity, you should be eating more pulses because these are a win-win for the entire human race and the planet that we live on.
Right. So every other food product that I can think of has pros and cons. It has some benefits, but there's always like a downside to most other foods. I can't think of any downside or negative or disadvantage to pulses. Can you?
No, so
Well, we
yeah.
work for the pulse grower, so of
I
course.
know, but
But
even if you weren't, let's say you were totally neutral and independent, it sounds like the perfect food, and I don't see any negatives about it.
yeah, I will just mention the concern that people have with eating beans that they will might get, some stomach pain and things like that. So this happens absolutely. It can happen with any type of fiber. If we eat too much broccoli, we can also have issues.
Right,
So I think that I will give an advice if you want to start eating pulses, maybe don't start with a cup a day. Just start slow, increase with time, but start slow because you need to let your gut microbes to get used to the new food, and they
right.
will populate and they will help you to digest it. So with time, it will get better. But
Yeah,
that's something that.
obviously there are individual differences. I mean, I can eat tons of pulses and I have no stomach problems or issues, but some people can get a slight bloated feeling. So everybody's different, but you have to get used to it and slowly increase your intake.
That absolutely true. In my case, right, I'm eating pulses every single day, and your gut microbiome will adjust to that.
Mhm.
And I do not have any problems with extra gas or a bloated feeling stomach because I'm just eating them on a much more regular basis. And that can happen with a lot of different
Mhm.
vegetables, right?
Yeah,
We just
yeah,
need it's not just pulses. Pulses get that rap of, oh, I'm going to get gas because I'm eating pulses. No, you just need to eat them consistently. You need to include them in your diet, not just once a month. You need to be
right.
consuming these, 2 or 3 times a week at least, and to really help and see the benefits actually of consuming these crops for your health and for your diet.
Right. So let me ask you this. Why doesn't the American USA food industry have more emphasis on pulses instead of being really into highly processed foods, which now we know cause problems? Why hasn't the food industry promoted this more?
Well, I would argue that the food industry now is starting to recognize pulses, and they are looking for ways to include them more and more into different menu items. So I think for a long time we have been the forgotten food, the grandma and grandpa's food. And now we're figuring out that, grandma and grandpa's food was pretty healthy for you. And consumers, frankly, are starting to say and starting to demand more pulse crops in their food choices. And so, we work with all the major food companies in the United States, continually encouraging them to really innovate with pulses in their food products. And so I think we're turning that tide. And I think the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee scientific community has recognized that, and it's going to help us send that message not only to consumers, but to food manufacturers and our school lunch programs that, you know what? We have got to increase consumption of these foods in our diet. And that is going to get a response and get the food manufacturers more focused on how they can use these foods in different food applications for our young people and the rest of our population.
Yes, and I will just add to that we are seeing the increase, and just with the new food product launches, we see in last 5 years we observed that 1 in 5 products,
Right.
new food products, contain pulse ingredients. So yes, it's very encouraging, and I hope it will be increasing. And to go back to your question, so from the food production standpoint, so first the other ingredients such as corn or wheat, they are, for now at least, cheaper options for food producer, and also they are easier because there was so much already development done on this. So the food manufacturers, they know how to handle them. And for example, in case of corn is just starch, and starch is very easy to work with in terms of food. You can make everything with it. And once you have pulses, they will also have fiber and protein. So it's the mix that suddenly you need to adjust your processing, you need to adjust ingredients. So it's a little bit more challenging, but now we see food producers are making a huge development, for example, with pastas. We used to see pulse pastas, but they will have a lot of different additives, like xanthan gums or so. But now, no, we can find pastas that are just, for example, whole pea flour.
Yeah.
Right?
Whole
No
lentils.
other ingredients. And it was just a matter of figuring out how to make it with the processing.
Right.
Yeah, I loved chickpea pasta is awesome.
Absolutely.
I eat it all the time. It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, and we're an under-researched crop, right, in the food innovation space. And that's changing because people are starting to invest more in the innovation and the research of how to figure out how to use these foods to make terrific pasta, to make terrific cookies and breads and snacks, and that are healthy and good for you. And so it is changing. We're very excited. We say here at our office at USA Pulses that we're having a moment, and we think this moment is going to have a lot of legs for a lot of years because these foods are so important to people's diets.
Right. One other thing I might suggest, if you haven't done it already, is, physicians like me, I'm an ophthalmologist, but I know many internists and family practitioners. We don't get much training about nutrition in medical school, and then we don't educate our patients about what the proper nutrition is. So I think there should be more emphasis on nutrition and diet in medical school and in internships and residencies so that doctors can tell their patients of the importance of Pulse's foods and what proper nutrition is.
We want to call out specifically the medical community in New York City, which has taken a real bold step forward to offer plant-forward diets first to their patients. And in fact, we're doing a special seminar here next week with some of the top nutritionists and influencers in the United States. And we're bringing in those folks from the New York City Hospital folks to talk about how they converted their hospitals to be plant forward first. Doesn't mean they don't offer meat, they do, but the first thing is offered to their patients is plant forward. And they've learned a lot from that. And they have the Sodexo folks that runs their hospital food system has learned a lot and offering great recipes. And now, patients they're showing actually are starting to prefer it. They'll actually choose it without so much resistance as was in the beginning. It's just getting good offerings, great, terrific, delicious foods that are good for your health. And so we just want to give a shout out to the New York City Hospital community that really took that really bold step to make that happen.
What you need is a short video or even maybe a picture of Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and RFK Jr. eating roasted chickpeas while they're watching the Super Bowl. All right. Once you
There you
get
go.
that, the rest of the country will just follow. You won't be able to produce enough pulses.
Yeah, well, I think we will be able to produce enough pulses because they can be grown really virtually anywhere in the country. We only produce about 3.5 million acres in the United States right now versus corn, which is like 100 million acres.
Wow.
Soybeans about 80 million acres, wheat's about 60 million acres. I mean, look, we're only consuming in this country right now about 12 pounds per person per year of pulse crops in
Mm,
our diets versus over 600 pounds of dairy, right?
really?
168 pounds of meat, 134 pounds of cereal grains. So we have a lot. We can boost, consumption of these crops and double our consumption, which is our goal, to double consumption and production of these crops within 5 years. And we really appreciate, the opportunity to talk with you on your
Yeah,
podcast to get this message out because,
yeah,
your listeners are our customers, right? And we're just trying to really help them improve their diets and their health outcomes going forward.
right. Well, I appreciate very much your taking the time to educate me and the public out there about this very important topic, and that is pulses and nutrition and reducing chronic disease. Very important. I think there's going to be a huge emphasis on this in the next 4 years, and
Agreed.
I think you're exactly in the right place at the right time to do this. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you. Really, really fun conversation
Yeah,
with you. And again, we don't, to your point, right? We need to do a better job of educating, our medical community about the importance of really good nutrition in the diets of our, of consumers, and are the people that we love and know, right? And so, we got to start with doctors, right? And we're glad you called us.
yep. Yep. If you want to keep your heart pulse going for a long, long time, then you should eat pulses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You want a strong
That's good.
pulse? You should be eating pulses.